기자부대, hop on the beat!
In December, we saw the release of the third issue of the JoJo magazine, which included a ton of new JoJo content from interviews and special features to original short stories. I went over everything there in a recent video, which I recommend watching especially for some of the Araki interviews. The most important thing here, though, was a new manga chapter, a follow-up to 2021's Cool Shock Old BT, the sequel to Araki's first serialized manga from before JoJo, Cool Shock BT. It's written by Nisio Isin, creator of the Monogatari series, who also wrote the JoJo light novel Over Heaven. It's illustrated by Posuka Demizu, who did the art for the manga The Promised Neverland. If you weren't already familiar, Old BT was pretty notable for containing a huge amount of references to JoJo and other Araki manga. I made a video back then going over all the references, so I'm doing the same here. First, we start with the title of the chapter itself. It's called the Say Hi to Old Virginia incident. This is referencing Araki's old one-shot manga, Say Hi to Virginia, a sci-fi story set in space. The chapter is mostly a retelling of that story, but with BT and Koichi as the main characters. The title uses a bit of wordplay, which we can't really see in English. The title's actually written like Ba Shinya, meaning Hag Senior, which sounds like the Virginia in the original title, so a bit of a play on words for how the characters are all old. The cover for the chapter shows BT doing the same pose from the volume cover of the original story. The chapter starts by telling us that BT looks familiar, or rather that we know his gaze and the way he rubs his ear. This is referencing Speedwagon's introduction at the beginning of Part 2, which said his gaze and scar were familiar. Just on this page alone, we have another handful of references. BT rubbing his ear is something he does multiple times in the original manga, usually when he's thinking. We also have BT's ventriloquist dummy, some playing cards, and a trilobite fossil, which all appeared in the original manga. Then we have our first JoJo references with the turtle, Coco Jumbo, and the Mikitaka dice floating nearby. Then we go to Koichi speaking directly to the audience to introduce the story. This scene and the layout of the page are just like the second chapter of the original story, something which was also referenced in the first Old BT chapter. Koichi mentions that it's 2060 AD, and says that in the sci-fi novel 2061 Odyssey 3, mankind was on its way to Halley's Comet. This is referencing the opening narration from JoJo's Koichi in Part 5. There he says that it's the year 2000, and that in the movie 2001 A Space Odyssey, humanity traveled to Jupiter. Here in Old BT, it instead references one of the novelization's sequels. On the spaceship with them is a robot called Echoes Act 4. This is of course a reference to Koichi's stand Echoes, which had 3 acts. Here we see an idea of what an older Act 4 would look like. In the story itself, Act 4 takes on the role that the robot Clyde did in the original Say Hi to Virginia. We're also introduced to the spaceship. In Say Hi to Virginia, it was called the Derringer. Here it's renamed to the Cool Shock, referencing the manga's title. Outside floating through space, we can also spot the stand Rolling Stone from Part 5 and the window frame that Pucci used to float upwards in the Made in Heaven arc. Act 4 gives Koichi a plate of abalone risotto. This is the same dish that Tonio made in the Thus Spoke Ushibe Rohan chapter Poaching Seashore. Koichi compliments Act 4 and says that he could easily be the head chef at Tonio's restaurant. He says that the risotto is so smooth that he could tube feed it to him, something that the main character Hiroshi said in the original story. When Koichi says, "Why do you think that is?" it's referencing a line from the younger Darby in Part 3 when asking why they thought his brother never challenged him to a game. We also see Act 4 peeling an apple, something Clyde did in the original story. The way the bomber is introduced is identical to the original, appearing as a distorted silhouette on the computer screen. Koichi's line saying knock knock and his pose are referencing Joseph in Part 2 from this manga-only scene set in Mexico. When Koichi imagines the bomb going off, the image resembles the first bomb's explosion in the original story. We're shown a diagram of the ship which is very similar to the one for the Derringer. Here we see that the length of the two ships are the same, 168 meters. The first bomb is modeled after Sheer Heart Attack from Part 4. It also says its usual catchphrase of "look over here." The sound effect from the bomb is also the same one from the Virginia bomb in the original story. Koichi uses a unique slang word here, mukototama. This is a combination of the Japanese slang mukatsuku, meaning to be pissed off, and dotama nikuru, which means to get to one's head. The word was used by the character Nino Mori in the third BT chapter, and by the female Outlaw Guys employee in the first old BT chapter. BT unfolds the note from the bomb and asks if they tried to use a road roller to fold it, of course referencing Dio's steamroller from Part 3. When BT asks Koichi to answer the riddle, his shocked expression and the sound effect is the same one that Josuke has when hunting for the rat in Part 4. When the sheer heart attack bomb is deactivated, it sinks into the ground, similar to when it was under the effect of Act 3's ability. When Koichi celebrates, he appears in the style of Boingo's book, and the same bird and sun that appear in the book are seen in the background. We can also see BT's puppet styled to look like Boingo. When BT says, "Are you crazy, but we're having so much fun?" this references a line he had in the 5th chapter of BT. This also appeared in the previous old BT chapter. When BT repeats Koichi's name while petting the bomb, it resembles when Prosciutto does the same for Pesci in Part 5. BT saying that he'll make them pay also references his line in the previous chapter. The second bomb looks like a giant orange, referencing Oingo's orange bomb from Part 3. BT calls the bomb a Bombwork Orange, referencing the original title of the chapter that the bomb first appeared in Part 3. The title, of course, is referencing the Stanley Kubrick movie A Clockwork Orange. When BT says that they're in the most durable part of the ship, it's referencing a similar line from Lovers in Part 3, when they multiplied and said they were the most terrifying stand of all. When BT says that there's no way to disarm the bomb, he says that all they can do is bite the dust, referencing Kira's third bomb bites the dust from Part 4. Later BT repeats no, and yes, referencing the fight with Terrence Darby in Part 3. We're shown a collage of Koichi and BT's memories together which contains a number of references. First, in this memory of a funeral, you can also see Iggy from Part 3 there. When they show Koichi's book release, Koichi is dressed in his striped suit from the 6th chapter. BT is wearing Dio's outfit from the 1st chapter of Phantom Blood. The book is one that he wrote about BT's life called Cool Shock BT, which is based on the manga itself. Like in the previous chapter, it says that Rohan from Part 4 illustrated the cover. We see BT and Koichi in front of a statue of Sherlock Holmes. This is likely alluding to Araki saying that BT is like Holmes and Koichi is like Watson. Behind the statue, you can also see Naranja's Aerosmith flying. We see BT standing in front of a Spinosaurus skeleton that he excavated, referencing the 5th BT chapter. You can also see Dio's bone from Part 6 on the floor. When we see Koichi in the hospital bed, he has a teddy bear on his shoulder, like Toru's design in JoJolion. We see the two on vacation in Hawaii, possibly referencing the setting of Part 9, the JoJo lands. On the beach you can see a hand sticking out of a bag, referencing one of Kira's victims from his introduction in Part 4. There's also a beetle on a tree, which we see in Part 3's Yellow Temperance fight. The Polaroid camera BT has is just like Joseph's from early in Part 3. We see the two of them looking at Switzerland watches, referencing the pilot chapter of BT. The watches in the case are labeled Star Platinum and the World. We see the two playing football with the same uniforms as Jonathan and Dio after the time skip in Part 1. And at BT's magic show, he's carrying Jonathan's sword, Luck and Pluck. When BT says that he has a plan and that he isn't running away, it's referencing Joseph in Part 2, who says that his plan is to run away. When BT and Koichi fist bump, it's just like the one Kakyoin and Polnareff do in the High Priestess fight. Koichi says Grazie Act 4, referencing when Joseph said Grazie Loggins after his death. BT says Jotaro's catchphrase of Yare Yare Daze and predicts Manabu's next line like Joseph. Manabu reappears as the villain from the previous chapter. He was originally the villain in the 6th chapter of BT. When he's defeated, he has the same pose from the previous 2 times he was defeated as well. The outside of his ship, which also looks like an orange, has the name of his organization Outlaw Guys written on it. The name first appeared in the previous chapter, referencing another Araki one-shot, Outlaw Man. At the end of the chapter, BT mentions that his grandmother knew about an ultimate life form floating through space who is both a creature and a mineral, and the two leave to find it to get eternal life. This is referencing the fate of Cars from the end of Part 2. BT says that it'll be as simple as picking up a small stone, referencing a similar line from BT Chapter 5. The closing narration from Koichi is the same one from Chapter 4, saying BT is a wicked boy and his best friend. And that's all the references in this chapter. I think we got a pretty good amount of them this time around, and of course I really enjoy any kind of acknowledgement for Say Hi to Virginia since it's very overlooked. The chapter itself I also really enjoyed, and I think it served as a bit of an emotional cap on the whole BT story. I'm interested in seeing if there will be another one at this point, since unlike the last chapter, this one doesn't say to be continued. The artist has actually mentioned that she wants to draw a story with BT as a kid someday. We got to see a bit of that in this chapter and with some of the concept sketches we've seen. But I'd definitely like to see how they approach a story with the characters as kids again, or maybe as young adults in between. BT is just such a versatile character, kind of like Rohan, so I feel like there's no limit to the stories you can tell with them. With this out of the way, I'll again recommend that you check out my magazine video if you haven't already, and keep up with the channel since I'm planning a lot of videos for the near future. To stay updated, make sure you subscribe and click the bell. You can also join the Hum and Beat Discord to be updated when new videos release. Finally, I'd appreciate if you help support the channel on Patreon. There you'll receive Discord perks and the opportunity to submit questions. This video's question comes from C Manga. They ask what my favorite character's fashion is in each part. Well, great question since fashion is one of Araki's biggest influences with how it's expressed in the manga. It's also tough though since there's so much to think about. The early parts are actually the hardest since the characters don't have set costumes and change them all the time. For part 1, I definitely say Dio's outfit when he first discovers the power of the stone mask. I always liked this one since it really sold the vibe of the era the story takes place in. For part 2, I love Lisa's final battle outfit the most. For part 3, it gets a bit easier since around here is when characters start sticking to a single outfit. For this one, I want to go to Joseph's outfit from his first appearance, which I think looks a lot better than what he usually wears. For part 4, there's no question, it's definitely Kira. I have to be really specific here though, since I actually really dislike the Shueisha colors with its ugly bluish suit. The anime's more purple version is better. But in my mind, the suit is best when it's white, like how it appears in All-Star Battle. I also think he's a bit better dressed when he's Kawajiri with his iconic tie. For part 5, I like Diavolo and his early appearances with the suit. For part 6, definitely Jolene. Of her 3 main appearances, I like her final one the best. For part 7, I like Hot Pants' outfit. For part 8, definitely Jobin. I've been in love with this design ever since it first appeared right when I caught up to the manga. For part 9, so far I like how Dragona looks the most. Finally we have the spin-offs. I could say Deadman's Question's Kira since that's one of my favorite designs, but I already have Kira on this list. So I'm gonna go with Eve from Hot Summer Martha, specifically her TV drama design. If you want to submit a question, you can join the Patreon at any tier and send it through a direct message or through the community chat, which at the moment is only available on the mobile app. I try to answer one question per video, so if you join, please submit as many as you like. Because of a change Patreon made recently, all the old questions were deleted, so I'm hoping to get some new questions to build up a big enough group of them to keep up with new videos. Thank you for watching. This is the part of the video where I thank my $5 and up patrons. Thank you to Sloth Dog, Doorbell, Crayon, Rigovids, Zucato, Pumpkin Doge, Marrow, Almighty Quarth, Gatling Grove, Lime Jinjo, Sponge Cake, Cakext, Feliciano Rabaja, Rihanna Meme, Christian McDonough, Emmanuel Etienne, Pulse Dog, Great Riek, Carmotrina, Adam Grogan, Zach Greenfield, FIFO, Rob Goliath, Jacob Smith, Professor Foosball, Ryan Ramirez, Big T, C Manga, and Minty.